All right. This is People Are the Worst, the show where leadership meets reality, because navigating people and people problems isn't just part of the job. It is the job. Join us as we tackle the messy, the maddening, and the downright ridiculous, and explore how to lead through it all with clarity, courage, and maybe some caffeine. I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Lucy. And today we are going to explore the rise of leadership intelligence. And I've forgotten my caffeine. I've only had water.
Oh no.
Next time. I know. Huge oversight on my part. So we're going to be talking about leadership intelligence. And in a world where AI is disrupting everything from how we work to how we communicate, traditional leadership tactics just don't cut it anymore. And leadership intelligence is a new way of thinking about leadership that's not based on having all the answers, but on being resilient, curious, human, and fast moving in a very unpredictable environment. And in the next few episodes, Linz and I are going to break down what leadership intelligence really is, and then unpack 5 core skills that we believe modern leaders need to build trust, guide teams through uncertainty, and make faster, smarter decisions. But first, let's share what we believe those 5 skills are to improve our leadership intelligence.
Awesome. So number 1 is personal resilience. Leaders need to be steady in chaos, experiment, stay curious, and don't panic when things change. And then number 2 is team resilience. Great leaders help teams weather disruption by building psychological safety, guiding through conflict, and knowing when to repair what's been shaken. Number 3, leading with curiosity. The best leaders ask better questions. Leadership intelligence turns uncertainty into insight by being deeply curious and inviting new ideas. Number 4 is making high velocity decisions. AI moves fast, and we must too. Leadership intelligence helps us make smart, fast decisions by balancing data, people, and process, and then documenting it for clarity and speed. And number 5, most importantly, staying human. Even in a world of automation, human connection is the most powerful leadership skill. Empathy, trust, and thoughtful communication are soft skills and survival skills.
And through our conversations with clients, we were talking about this in our all hands this week. On a daily basis, we're hearing at Elevate a lot of struggles, and you probably are in your work as well. So to those of you who are listening, you are not alone. Today's leaders we found are really facing, when we talk to HR teams, people teams, when we are interacting with our coaching clients, leaders are facing this perfect storm of new challenges. We've got distributed workforces. Those are not new, but they're still, communication still has to be really good. AI adoption mandates, pandemic trauma. Still, it was hard going through COVID, and we're still shaking out from that. And this very polarizing political climate. There is a lot going on in the world at the moment, and it's just heavy. Our team are feeling it. Our clients' teams are feeling it. It's heavy.
Yeah. It really was amazing at All Hands this week, where you just, everyone was, we had sort of a 1 to 10, and everyone was, it's heavy. It's hard. It's hard times right now.
Yeah.
So this week in People Are the Worst, we're going to talk about the first 2 of those 5 skills, building personal resilience and navigating team resilience. So let's start with the personal resilience, because as always, we've got to put our oxygen mask on first. So Luce, how do you suggest people do that? How do we build personal resilience?
Yeah, this is a really juicy, meaty topic to get into. What I found is a large part of staying and building resilience is about paying attention to the way that we actually nuke our own confidence, right? We don't, sometimes, these negative thoughts that we have in our minds, we say themselves in our minds, and they tend to really dampen down the confidence that we have. And that massively impacts our resilience. Ethan Cross, who is a award-winning psychologist and director of the Emotion and Self-Control Lab at the University of Michigan. He says that, these cyclical negative thoughts put our performance, our decision-making, relationships, happiness, and even health in jeopardy. So the conversations we have with ourselves really matter. And the literature shows us that negative internal chatter, as he calls it, this chatter, and I love that way of thinking about it, interferes a lot with our ability to focus and solve problems. And it saps our inner processing resources. And it can be this huge liability. And we can all relate to that. And the first step here is to really pay attention to that inner monologue that you have in order to raise our awareness about what we say to ourselves. What do you say to yourself that lowers your confidence in certain situations? Maybe in groups with senior people, you tell yourself you're not experienced enough. Maybe in cross-functional meetings, you tell yourself that you're not assertive enough. Maybe presenting to leadership, you tell yourself that you don't have that gravitas to be influential. We all do this, but the trick is to catch ourselves. And there's no better way to catch ourselves than having awareness ahead of time. And so for those of you who are sitting down and can grab a pen and paper, there's a set of 4 questions, which I'm going to tell you now, which are really, really useful to help yourself raise that awareness of what you do say to yourself on a daily basis in most cases that nukes your confidence and impacts your personal resilience. The first one is, what do you say to yourself that has the potential to impact your confidence and resilience? Just take a second to write it down. What do you think you say to yourself? Now, sometimes there are many different flavors of this, but there will be a theme across all the different pieces that you write down. And pause this now if you need some extra time. The second question is, what is the cost to you of holding on to that negative belief or narrative? What is the cost of holding on to that belief or narrative? How does it impact you on a daily basis? Where do you find it shows up? The third question is, well, what facts can you think of that would argue against your negative belief? What facts can you think of that would argue that negative belief or that set of negative beliefs that you've written down are actually untrue? Try and find in your heart of hearts those things that make those statements untrue. And the third step in the process is to write down, what would you prefer to say to yourself instead? What would you prefer to say to yourself instead? And when we understand what we prefer to say to ourselves instead, we can start that reprogramming exercise of every time we find ourselves saying a flavor of that negative belief, you stop yourself and you say your alternative statement instead. This is really forms the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy for those of you who are familiar with that. And these 4 questions will just really help raise that awareness and help impact your resilience. And I say that was probably the first thing that we teach folks when it comes to how to improve our personal resilience. We've got to get those negative talk tracks out of our minds.
Love that, Luce. I love also, I think when he talks about negative internal chatter, because it is just sort of that noise in your head, right? And so I think really sort of first step, as you say, is really picking up on it and saying, like, what is that? What am I actually saying? What is that? And writing that down. Yeah. And then going through those steps. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get into specific questions that you have written in with. And our first one is from Brock, and he asks, how to set clearer boundaries with my team. I need some respect for my time and distinction between our roles. So sounds like he is in the weeds, doing more than he should, and not really working on the high impact activities that as a manager and a leader would be more fruitful. So Linz, how would you answer that for Brock?
Yes, I think that, the reality is that every major disappointment is a failure to set expectations. And so I think that the reality too is that expectations are all around us. And often they're unspoken or implicit. And it sounds like Brock right now, like he's just set some implicit expectations that are just not working, right? And he might not even be aware that he's set them, but the way that he's operating is creating these implicit expectations, right? So I think the first thing is to step back and say, what expectations do I need to make explicit? What do I need to make really clear? And I think that in this situation, and we see this a lot, I think it's probably right now really about like, what is his to own and what is theirs? What is the team's to own? And I think that really taking the time to document that, to make it really explicit, to clarify it, right, can be incredibly helpful when we're trying to build resilience for ourselves and our teams, because in times of stress and change, it is actually incredibly grounding for people to really understand what they own, like what is theirs to do and what is their managers to do. And it's not just knowing what theirs is, it's also knowing what their managers is. And so they can see sort of where that line is and they can feel supported, but they also know what is theirs. And so I think that also just gives people that sense of control. And so we've got to make expectations explicit and really be clear about what is mine as the manager to own and what is yours. And I think what often happens, and I see this a lot in coaching sessions, is those lines get blurred unintentionally because we're moving so fast. Your direct report comes to you, they've got a question, right? And you end up just kind of hopping in and start getting really into the weeds because, you're trying to sort things out together. And all of a sudden, without meaning to, you start kind of getting too in the weeds and you start doing their job for them, right? And then all of a sudden those lines get really blurred. And so again, this is going to happen. Like it's so natural. And so it's more when it does happen, it's just pulling back and just noting it and being like, hey, I realize like I just got so in the weeds. And I think we need to come back and like remind ourselves, right? Like what is yours to own? What is mine to own? And then, and just kind of keep checking in on that, right? And then I think there's like little hacks, right? Where you can be, where you can kind of communicate because it's the what is yours to own and what is mine to own. And there's the how, right? And that how might be, as simple as like, when you come to me and you've got a question or whatever, come with a solution too, right? Or let's make, the time that we really think through things in our one-on-one so that you've got a bit more boundary as well.
Yeah.
So I think number one is just make sure make those expectations explicit, because the reality there are implicit expectations and they're probably just not serving you right now. And so make it clear, document it, and then just know that you're going to end up blurring that line. And that's okay. Just name it when it happens, revisit the expectations, and then bi-directional feedback, just being like, okay, how are we doing here? Do you feel like you're supported because I'm taking that sort of higher level? And do you feel like you've got the autonomy and the ownership that you need to be able to be successful? And I think that just coming back to these fundamentals will really improve the resilience of you and your teams when just the expectations are clear.
Yeah. And we'll come back to how to set clear boundaries for yourself and your team. I think we have a question a little later on that will address that in a little bit more depth as well.
Yes.
What's up next, Linz?
What's up next? I think many people could probably relate to this. So Evelyn wrote in and she said, I tend to be a very emotionally available manager and leader, but as my team has grown, it has become more mentally and emotionally taxing to operate in this way because all of the emotional labor I feel I have to perform on behalf of my reports. So how can I still lean into the strength while better managing my own energy, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of leaders out there, I'm sure, as Lindsey says, you can relate, where your style of leadership is to be very emotionally available. I think that's a generational thing as well. And a lot of us find, I think, that, managers aren't therapists, but most of the time, most of us are acting like it. And I would suggest two main things here. Firstly, is to focus on what you can control. And secondly, is to take the ownership off your shoulders and coach your reports instead. So to go back to the control piece, the three spheres of control are, control, influence, and concern was popularized by Stephen Covey. And some of you, and we'll put the diagram in the show notes so that you can see it. But your sphere of control is like the smallest circle in the diagram. And that essentially represents your actions, decisions, and your responsibilities. And those are the only things that you truly have control over. And then that's nested within a larger circle, which is your sphere of influence. These are things that you have an impact on. And finally, the larger outer circle is your sphere of concern, which is all the things that you could sort of be thinking or worrying about. So the question is, well, what would happen if you chose to let go of the sphere of concern pieces, at least for a time? And that really helps us kind of conserve our energy and boost our resilience. So focusing on what you can control and influence, that smaller circle, helps you direct your energy where it can actually make a difference, which makes you both more effective and, as a big bonus, much less exhausted. And too often we spend our time and emotional cycles worrying about things that are outside of our sphere of influence, let alone our sphere of control, whether that's other people's decisions, external circumstances, past events, policies in our working environment, and so on. So the question is, where can you really focus on the things that you can control? And that kind of brings things down to a smaller perspective, which can really help conserve your energy. And now onto the second piece, which is taking the ownership off your shoulders and really leaning into coaching your direct reports instead. And we see this a lot where, especially in newer managers, where you can't, it's very easy to feel like you have to solve everybody's problems for them all the time. And you can't solve everyone's problems. And it's emotionally draining to try to. And so we've got to switch the frame up here, switch the frame and ask questions to help your reports better. So instead of trying to solve the problem, ask the questions and really lean on your natural empathy skills. It sounds like in our question here that Evelyn actually felt like it was a key strength of hers to function in this way, which kind of indicates to me that she does have strong empathy skills. So do lean on those and follow that with questions that use these zones of control model, right, that we just went through. So questions to your team like, this situation does sound really tough. Tell me, in this situation, what do you actually have control over yourself? It could be a very empowering question just to de-scope that down again. What can you do to make progress on those things that you do have control over? Other questions you could try would be, what could you try if time was not an issue? Or what could you try if money or resources was not an issue? Or if the cross-functional relationship that's gone wrong here wasn't an issue? So trying to kind of remove the blocker for them for a moment so that they can brainstorm how they would actually move forwards in the situation. If we were to break this problem down into more manageable pieces, what would that look like? And what could you do to take just one small step forward? So we're also sort of de-scoping this. It's not a huge solve. What's just one thing that's going to move you just a little closer to where you need to be with this problem? Where do you not have control and therefore just need to let go? So you can see how you can use these spheres of influence, Stephen Covey's spheres of influence, to coach your team in a way that unburdens yourself and helps them with the right behaviors, which is to solve the problems themselves. Otherwise, you're what's the word that I'm trying to look for? You're reinforcing those like bad behaviors in inverted commas, where they run to you whenever there's a challenge or they're feeling down and upset about something. And the nice thing about coaching is it doesn't close the door to them being able to vent. It doesn't close the door to them telling you how they're feeling, which it sounds like Evelyn as a manager does want them to. She's not saying like, just don't come to me with your issues. Like, it's an open door, but it's just a way of managing that conversation that's not so incredibly emotionally draining for you as a manager, especially as your teams get larger.
Yeah, I love that because you can really still show up for them and help them, but you're giving them a framework that they can then use themselves.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it.
And we love a good framework here.
We love a good framework.
We love a good framework. We love a good framework.
Well, continuing on with, I think we've got another one, right, Luce, about team resilience, I would say.
Yeah. Robert's asked us, okay, our company is growing. He put yay in brackets, which I like. Yay. And our team is splitting into key functions. What recommendations would you have to ensure the culture and relationships carry on, even with a change in team dynamics? And this is such a good, you can see how resilience is like wound into this question here, where he's really asking, like, how am I setting my team up for success when there is inevitably going to be change?
Yes. And I think, Robert, kudos to you too, because I think this is actually very exciting, right? Like, this is good news, as you say. And so there might not be a problem yet, but when we think about building team resilience, one of the key things is really taking a preventative mindset. So really getting ahead of it. And I think that's exactly your opportunity right now. And the bedrock of team resilience is psychological safety. And so how do we keep that psychological safety? How do we keep it intact? How do we build upon it in these times? And, leaders foster that psychological safety by one, acknowledging their own fallibility, right? Like they don't have all the answers.
We're all
Two is including and creating input from others. And then modeling curiosity instead of judgment. So I think Robert's got a really exciting opportunity right now in terms of the ability to really get input from others in an area that will really help create ownership and serve them as they want to make sure that they maintain the parts of their culture that work. And so, one idea here, right, is like getting the team together and gathering input and deciding on like what part of the current culture is really serving them, right? And will serve them going forward. And what part do they want to change? Because maybe in this new world order, like the reality is that that's not actually going to work or that's not going to serve them. So I think, again, preventative, getting ahead of it, which you're doing, really thinking the bedrock of team resilience is psychological safety. So let me gather input and let's answer this question about what we want together and get clear on what that looks like. And then I think, that will just even relax people a bit because they'll be like, okay, good. We are keeping the parts that work, right? And we're actually going to talk about, because there's probably stuff that isn't working or won't work in the future. So that's number one. And then I think number two is also to recognize that the team's going to keep growing, right? Hopefully. And so how do you then pull that culture through as the team grows? And I think that's when you really embed it into your hiring practices and your interview questions and making sure that that is a component of it. And then also when people come on, right, is like really being explicit about the culture in your onboarding docs, talking about it, right? And then, I think there's also those elements of like just the day to day of when are you practicing these things, right? How is it showing up in your processes? And I think like, what are the rituals around it? And I think here, because there's going to be so much change, I think it'd be really nice, like to kind of have like check-in points, right? So it's like, listen, we're going to kind of keep checking in on this, and you can do it formally, like maybe, I don't know, every 6 weeks to just come back and you do a culture pulse, like how are we doing, right? Have we been keeping the things we wanted to? Have we been trying to move away from the things that we didn't want? So I think all in all, exciting times and just really smart to think ahead before it gets rocky and really allowing people and including others' inputs to help build that psychological safety and really a greater output too.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's kind of 4 steps that you were saying there, kind of summarize for everyone. It's like step 1 is getting the team together and gathering input. Step 2 is pulling that culture through as the team grows, making sure that it's embedded in your processes and things like that. Step 3 is making sure when you onboard new people that they're really clear about the kind of culture that you're trying to build. And step 4 is just making sure that it is through your kind of comms and procedures, and you set up team rituals and things like that to really help people stay top of mind for folks.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. That's it.
Cool.
Thanks, Luce. All right. Well, we've got another one here, which probably a lot of us can also relate to. So Amy, thanks for sharing this one. Amy's asking, how do you maintain work-life balance if you work in a space that doesn't understand the importance of it? And thus, how do you protect your direct reports' balance as well when you're in a fast-moving and really demanding job?
Yeah. It is quite sucky when you work in an environment where it is just not prioritized at all. Mental health. It is very, very hard to set boundaries when it's not a cultural norm across an entire organization to maintain a good, healthy work-life balance, or however you prefer to say it. And I think the main thing is just to never feel guilty about setting boundaries for yourself. This is how we prevent burnout. It's one of the most important things to do and to master as a manager, because when you set boundaries for yourself, when you don't set boundaries, should I say, we'll go there first. When you don't set boundaries for yourself, firstly, it is very hard to manage your time. Super hard to manage your time. 2, you're likely to feel more stressed. Boo, we don't want that. 3, other people have a tendency to take advantage of you. And we see this a lot. Give an inch, they take a mile. 3, no, that was 3. 4, rather, you don't send a positive message to your team that it's okay for them to set boundaries as well for themselves. And I think even if you're not in an environment that understands that, you can still set the right culture on your team, right? You are in control of that, at least, which goes back to our spheres of control. You are in control of the culture of your team. And at the end of the day, you need to be the manager that you would want to work for. And incidentally, that is the mission of Elevate, to enable managers to be the kind of manager they would want to work for. And so I think it might be helpful if I just give you some tips for how to set boundaries for yourself, because we know that that's key to keeping resilient and improving our own resilience. And it's key for your team feeling resilient as well. So tip number 1 is practice saying no. We love saying no. It's hard to say no. No one likes saying no. Well, some people do, but good for them. But here's some things that you could try, right? Some phrases that I'll give you. Maybe something along the lines of, I wish I could be more helpful to you, but I've got this large project to deliver over the next couple of weeks. I'm so sorry. I can't be more helpful. You're saying no, but it's nice. Now, saying no also doesn't even have to include the word no. You can say yes if you feel more so inclined. But the important thing about saying yes is that you have set some parameters around that yes. And that, in effect, is still you saying no. So that could sound like, yes, I would like to help, but I think Taylor has more of the details on this. Would you mind checking in with them first? So that just kind of like takes you're not putting the monkey on your back in that moment. You're giving it to somebody else who's more experienced, perhaps. Or yes, I'd be happy to help, but I'm just focused on this task, X task at the moment. Could you pop some time in my calendar later this afternoon to talk about it, or tomorrow to talk about it? You're still saying yes, but you're keeping those boundaries about how and when you use your time. Yes, I can take this on, but I'm going to need to drop something to make time. What would you like me to deprioritize? And in that way, you open up a conversation where you're like, this is the boundary I'm setting. I'm saying no to this unless we can have an adult conversation about what I can deprioritize. So those are my kind of tips and phrases for saying no. Tip 2 is resetting expectations. And this can alleviate a lot of stress when we do this well. And it comes up all the time. Sometimes what's making us feel stressed is an expectation that we've set with someone else that needs to change. Maybe it's something you said yes to, but wished you hadn't. We've all been there. Maybe it's a deadline you need to reset with someone, or a project that you need to rescope. Often having what may be a tough conversation now will ultimately help you and your team feel a lot less stressed down the line. And that's the important thing. Tip number 3 would be blocking your calendar. Now, I know this is easier said than done, but creating space that people can't block over with time to think, catch up on emails, plan the week, review the week even, is really, really important to keep your stress levels under control. And I know sometimes they're hard blocks to protect and people block, could pop a meeting in over the top of them. But even finding an extra 90 minutes a week or an hour a week will really help you feel a lot more resilient. And tip 4 is setting personal boundaries. And this is a really important one because it sets the tone for your whole team. You are allowed, as I said earlier, to set personal boundaries. So first of all, give yourself permission. Secondly, you will need to decide what they are. So this might be another moment now to reflect. Take a sec, pause the podcast for a minute. What are my personal boundaries at work? Some of us have never really thought about it. Sometimes I don't feel like, have I thought about it? I feel like I should drink my own champagne, as we say internally. What's important to me? What do I need in order to be at my best and have the energy to focus and do right by my team? The next step, once you've figured those out, is to talk about them. Make sure your team knows that you've been thoughtful about building personal boundaries into your week and have the conversation with them about what those thoughtful boundaries are that they might like to set for themselves. And this is a big one. Once you've verbalized your boundaries, helping them verbalize theirs is a really great next step. It's super simple and easy, and it can be a really fun topic for a team meeting discussion.
Love those. So helpful and so important and really fun. I think it could be such a fun team thing to do so it's a good activity to do, and it also forces you to do it as well. So definitely
Maybe we should make that our next.
I know. I think we should. Let's do that. I love that. Yeah. There we go. Icebreaker for next all hands.
Yeah.
All right, fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, finally, we got Toby. And he has asked, and this, I think we've just about got time for this one more question. Toby asks, how are others motivating employees when the environment is causing ambiguity and angst?
Toby, we hear you. I think here, just really creating the space to listen one-on-one, because everybody's going to be a little bit different, right? And so I think creating that space and just checking in and listening. Again, you don't have to have the answers. And I think also this is a great opportunity to use those spheres of control. So listen, and it can just be a check-in. Just be like, hey, I just want to know how you're doing. There's a lot going on right now. Let's just create space, have a check-in. And then, in that conversation, you can introduce the spheres of control and just talk through it as a framework and a model. I also think it can be nice too if everybody is really feeling this, because just sort of a sort of more macro reality, right? It's just creating space in a team meeting for people to talk. Like we did that at All Hands this week. It was just like, how is everyone doing, right? Like a true, give me the real, how you doing? And I think when people do share, is again, don't go into solve mode. You don't need to solve it. Don't put the monkey on your back, right? It's just about being empathetic and really listening and acknowledging that that's really hard and asking a second layer question, like maybe what feels most difficult about that. But you don't need to put it on yourself to solve. You just need to create the space to listen. I think the models of the spheres of control is a great framework to use. You can do it as a team as well. And then just empathy is
always your friend.
Really?
Empathy is always a friend.
Goes a long way.
Yes. Maybe we should do some role plays or something.
Oh, I love that.
To do. And I say one more thing is to keep people focused on the North Star when the environment is causing ambiguity and angst. It's what are the goals you're all striving towards? Where are you all rowing in the same direction? Keep people really aligned. And as Lynn's mentioned, setting your expectations really clearly. And for those of you who are a little bit more senior and want to create a vision for your team, that's also a great possibility where people can really feel like they share in that vision, with you. Anyway, so many things. It's a big ass topic. Did you like my American accent? Next podcast, Lucy's going to be doing it all in an American accent. And the one after that in a Scottish accent. See how many I can go around. Okay. Well, if you want to unpack what we've just discussed further, Let's connect on LinkedIn. Our LinkedIn links are in the show notes. And you can learn more about how we support people leaders at elevateleadership.com. And if you would like to send us an email with some further questions that Lindsey and I can answer for you, we always love fresh questions, see what's going on at the moment in the market and in the greater world at large. Please write to us at Dear L and L. So that's DEARLANDL at elevateleadership.com. And we will catch you next time on People Are the Worst.